The service elevator creaked as it carried me up to the penthouse of the St. Regis, where my father's 60th birthday celebration was in full swing. My Hermes bag, worth more than most cars, hung from my shoulder as I adjusted my intentionally modest dress. If they only knew that I owned the entire hotel through one of my holding companies. Miss, staff entrance only, a security guard reminded me, not recognizing the owner of his employer. Of course, I smiled, pulling out my invitation, the one marked, service entrance only in my father's precise handwriting. My phone buzzed. Market close confirmed. Morrison Global shares acquired. Controlling stake secured at 51%. Announcement scheduled for 9 p.m. I checked my watch. 8:15 p.m. In 45 minutes, my family would discover that their embarrassment had just become their boss. Through the kitchen doors, I could hear the clinking of crystal and my sister Amanda's practiced laugh. The same laugh she'd used when telling Society magazines how her poor sister just couldn't grasp proper business. If she only knew that her luxury cosmetics brand was secretly owned by my investment firm. Miss Chen, the head chef nodded, one of the few who knew my true identity. Everything is prepared according to your specifications. I slipped into the ballroom through the service door, exactly as instructed. The irony wasn't lost on me. The owner of a $22 billion empire entering through the back while trust fund socialites paraded through the grand entrance. My father stood at the center of his carefully curated world, champagne in hand, probably recounting how his real children had carried on the Morrison legacy while his youngest had settled for a modest consulting career. Elizabeth, my mother's voice dripped with familiar disappointment. Couldn't you at least have worn the dress I sent? The CEO of Morrison Global is here. I'm comfortable as I am, Mother, I replied, knowing my simple dress cost more than her monthly shopping budget. The massive screens around the ballroom, installed at my father's insistence to display stock tickers, would soon serve a different purpose. Morrison Global's stock price scrolled past, still hovering at its yearly high. In 30 minutes, those same screens would announce its new owner. At least try to network, my brother James sighed, flashing his new Rolex. Though I suppose with your, what do you call it? Small business consulting. I bit back a smile. My small consulting firm had orchestrated the hostile takeover of 3 Fortune 500 companies last month alone. While they bragged about million-dollar deals, I was quietly building an empire that would soon swallow their world whole. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC called out, please direct your attention to the screens for a special market announcement. 8:55 p.m. Almost time. My father raised his glass, expecting another celebration of Morrison Global's success. Instead, the breaking news banner flashed. Breaking. Phoenix Holdings acquires controlling stake in Morrison Global. Elizabeth Chen revealed as Phoenix. Wall Street stunned by $22 billion takeover. The champagne glass froze halfway to my father's lips as understanding dawned in his eyes. In that moment, years of dismissal and backdoor entrances crystallized into perfect clarity. Dad, I said, finally stepping into the spotlight, I believe we need to discuss the new direction of Morrison Global. The ballroom's stunned silence was broken only by the continuous updates flashing across the screens. Elizabeth Chen, from backdoor to boardroom. Phoenix Holdings reveals decade of stealth acquisitions. Morrison Global stock surges as new ownership announced. This has to be a mistake, James stammered, his Rolex suddenly feeling like costume jewelry. Phoenix Holdings is the company that's been buying up every major competitor in the past 5 years? I finished smoothly. The same company that acquired your independent trading division last quarter? Yes, that would be me. My security detail, disguised as wait staff throughout the evening, moved into position. The illusion of the humble consultant daughter shattered as my real power became evident. For those just catching up, I addressed the room, my voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who commanded billions. I'm Elizabeth Chen, founder and CEO of Phoenix Holdings. You might know us from our recent acquisitions, our market-moving investments, or perhaps, I paused, looking directly at my father, from the fact that we now own controlling interest in Morrison Global. Amanda's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. But your small consulting office in Brooklyn is actually the entire building, I corrected. Along with most of that block. Amazing what you can acquire when everyone underestimates you. The screens updated with more breaking news. Phoenix Holdings portfolio revealed. $22 billion empire built in silence. Elizabeth Chin, the billionaire they made use the back door. Morrison Global faces leadership shakeup as Chin takes control. My mother's social mask cracked slightly. But all those times you couldn't afford to join us at the country club. I own the club, I said simply. I own most of the properties you've bragged about frequenting. Those weekends you thought I was struggling with my small business? I was orchestrating global mergers. James pushed forward, desperation replacing his usual condescension. The new Asian market expansion was orchestrated by my team, I confirmed. Every major move Morrison Global made in the past 3 years was quietly guided by Phoenix Holdings. Though I should thank you all, your constant dismissal made it remarkably easy to operate undetected. My father found his voice, though it trembled with barely contained rage. The board will never accept. They already have, I cut him off, nodding to my CFO, who had been posing as an event coordinator. She distributed tablets showing the complete transaction details and board approvals. You see, Dad, while you were busy making me use service entrances, I was buying the entire building. Every time you marked staff entrance on my invitations, I was acquiring another piece of your empire. Every time you told me to stay out of sight during important meetings, I was becoming the most important person in the room. The business reporters who had come to cover a simple birthday party were now frantically calling their editors, realizing they were witnessing one of the biggest corporate takeovers in recent history. But why reveal everything tonight? Someone called from the crowd. Why at your father's birthday? I smiled, remembering every birthday where I'd been relegated to the kitchen entrance. Because, I replied, sometimes the best gifts come through the back door. The screens flashed with another wave of headlines as I moved toward the podium my father had abandoned. Phoenix Holdings announces immediate restructuring of Morrison Global. Chin Dynasty. How a daughter turned humiliation into billions. Morrison family faces ouster as Phoenix takes control. Let me make a few things clear, I announced, my voice carrying the weight of my $22 billion empire. Effective immediately, Morrison Global will undergo significant changes. First, the board of directors. You can't just walk in here and... James started. I already have, I cut him off. In fact, I've owned enough shares to control this company for months. I just waited for tonight to make it official. Poetic, don't you think? The daughter you made use the service entrance now decides who uses the front door. My CFO distributed new documents to the board members present. As you can see, Phoenix Holdings has already secured support from major shareholders. The restructuring begins tomorrow. Amanda, still trying to process the revelation, stepped forward. But your consulting work was a cover, I explained. Though I did consult on some interesting projects. Like the hostile takeover of Morrison Global, for instance. Turns out I'm quite good at corporate strategy when I'm not being forced to use the back door. The screens displayed real-time updates of Morrison Global's stock price soaring as investors reacted to the news. My net worth had increased by $3 billion just during this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, my COO announced, removing his waiter's disguise. Ms. Chin has prepared a detailed presentation on Phoenix Holdings' global strategy. Shall we proceed? I checked my watch. 9:30 p.m. Perfect timing. After all, what's a birthday party without a PowerPoint presentation? The color drained from my father's face as the screens shifted to display Phoenix Holdings' true reach. Phoenix Holdings reveals ownership of *47% of Asia-Pacific trading markets, *31% of European financial institutions, *28% of North American real estate development, and now 51% of Morrison Global. But this is impossible, my mother whispered. All those times you couldn't afford proper clothes. I own 3 fashion houses, I replied calmly. Including the one that made your dress. The one you wore while telling me to use the service entrance. James, desperate to salvage something, pulled out his phone. The board won't stand for. The board, I interrupted, has already voted. Check your email. Though I should mention, that trading algorithm you've been using? The one that made you financial profit of the year? I designed it. between birthday parties where I wasn't allowed to use the front door. The ballroom erupted in urgent whispers as Manhattan's elite realized the scope of my control. The daughter they'd banished to back entrances and service elevators actually owned most of their world. And now, I continued, for my father's birthday gift. I nodded to my team and the screens displayed a new announcement. Morrison Global to be renamed Phoenix International. Historic Morrison brand to be phased out. Elizabeth Chin appointed as CEO and chairwoman. My father staggered slightly. You're erasing our name. Just like you tried to erase me, I replied. Though I was more successful. Funny how that works. The daughter you made hide in the shadows now owns your legacy. The screens continued their relentless display of headlines, each one hammering home the magnitude of my takeover. Chin announces $5 billion restructuring of former Morrison empire. Wall Street stunned as service entrance strategy revealed. From backdoor to boardroom, the ultimate corporate revenge. You know what's fascinating? I addressed the room setting down my modest handbag. Every time you made me use the service entrance I bought another company. Every time you hid me from your important guests, I was becoming more powerful than all of them combined. Every time you treated me like staff I was quietly becoming everyone's employer. My mother, still reeling, made one last attempt at damage control. Darling, surely we can discuss this as a family. Family. I laughed softly. Now that's interesting. Tell me, mother, at which family gathering was I last allowed to use the front door? Was it before or after you started marking my invitations with staff entrance only? The room fell silent as years of carefully hidden humiliation surfaced. But let's talk business instead, I continued. Phoenix Holdings will be implementing immediate changes to all Morrison, former Morrison, properties. First order of business. All service entrances will be renovated to match the grandeur of the main entrances. After all, I smiled coldly, you never know when the person using the back door might own the building. My security team began escorting my family from their seats of honor. As they stood, diminished and shocked, I delivered the final blow. Oh, and Dad? Those merger deals you've been bragging about? The ones that saved Morrison Global from bankruptcy last year? Those were my companies buying pieces of yours. I could have taken control then, but I waited. I wanted this moment at your birthday party, when everyone would understand exactly what happens when you underestimate the daughter you banished to the service entrance. The screens flashed a new series of announcements. Phoenix Holdings launches $10 billion foundation for underestimated entrepreneurs. Chin establishes scholarship for children forced to use back doors. Wall Street giant announces front door for all initiative. James, making one last desperate play, stepped forward. The family legacy will be remembered. I cut him off, as the cautionary tale of how treating your daughter like staff led to losing your empire. Though I suppose there's a certain poetry in that. The service entrance you forced me to use became the path to owning everything. Walking toward the main entrance, for the first time at any family event, I paused for one final remark. By the way, that humble consulting work you mocked? It earned more last month than Morrison Global made in its best year. Not bad for the daughter you wouldn't let through the front door. The final headline of the evening flashed across the screens. Elizabeth Chin announces acquisition of entire Regis hotel chain. Former backdoor user now owns every entrance. As I stepped into my waiting Rolls-Royce, no more pretending to take the subway, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow's business pages would tell the story of the corporate takeover, but they'd miss the real headline. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one they make use the service entrance. 1 year later, the same St. Regis ballroom sparkled under crystal chandeliers, but everything else had changed. Every entrance now bore the Phoenix Holdings logo, and the staff wore uniforms emblazoned with my company's emblem. Miss Chin, my assistant approached. The quarterly reports are ready for announcement. The screens that once displayed Morrison Global's modest gains now showed Phoenix Holdings' staggering success. Phoenix Holdings reports 300% growth under Chin leadership. Former Morrison Global assets triple in value. Backdoor billionaire now world's youngest female CEO. My father, now working as a junior analyst at one of my smaller subsidiaries, stood in the corner, exactly where he used to make me stand. Poetic justice has a way of arranging these things perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, I addressed the room now filled with my chosen guests rather than my family's social circle. Welcome to Phoenix Holdings' first annual Equality Gala. Tonight we're announcing several initiatives that are particularly personal to me. The screens shifted to display my new projects. Phoenix launches $20 billion, Every Entrance Matters initiative. Chin Foundation to build business schools for underestimated leaders. Former Morrison properties to become innovation centers. You see, I continued, success isn't about which door you use to enter a room. It's about what you do once you're inside. Over the past year, Phoenix Holdings has demonstrated that principle by turning a failing family business into a global powerhouse. Amanda, now working in middle management at one of my cosmetics companies, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her designer dress, purchased with her considerably reduced salary, was last season's collection. Our new initiative will focus on identifying and supporting entrepreneurs who, like me, were told to use the back door. We're establishing a $20 billion fund to ensure that talent never again has to enter through the service entrance. James, who now drove for one of my car services, stood by the wall with the other drivers. His Rolex had been sold months ago to pay for his daughter's education, which, ironically, was now funded by one of my scholarship programs. But tonight isn't about the past, I smiled, watching my mother fidget with her non-designer pearls. It's about the future. Phoenix Holdings isn't just changing how business is done, we're changing who gets to do business. The screens displayed my latest acquisition. Phoenix Holdings acquires global luxury hotel chain. Chin announces, all entrances are equal policy. Hospitality industry transformed by backdoor billionaire. 1 year ago I stood in this room and revealed who really owned the building, I continued. Tonight I'm announcing who owns the future. Phoenix Holdings isn't just a company, it's a revolution. A revolution that starts with a simple principle. Every entrance is a front entrance when you own the building. My father's hands trembled as he served champagne to his former business associates. The man who once marked my invitations with service entrance now wore a name tag marking him as staff. To everyone who's ever been told to use the back door, I raised my glass. Welcome to the front of the room. The view is quite different from here, isn't it, Dad? The screens flashed one final headline. Elizabeth Chin, the billionaire who turned service entrances into corner offices. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just succeeding, it's rewriting the rules of success itself. And as I stood there watching my family serve drinks to my employees, I couldn't help but think. Every door is the right door when you own all the keys.